For years, he represented something rare in the entertainment industry. While many celebrities built their careers on carefully crafted personas, Kim Seon-ho appeared different. Audiences saw him as sincere, humble, approachable, and genuine. His smile felt natural. His interviews felt honest. His success story seemed almost impossible to dislike. By 2021, he had become one of South Korea's most beloved actors. His popularity was soaring. Major brands wanted him as their ambassador. Producers wanted him in their projects. Fans celebrated him as the embodiment of kindness and warmth. Then, in a matter of hours, everything changed. The collapse did not begin with a press conference. It did not begin with a police investigation. It did not even begin with a named accusation. Instead, it started with a single anonymous post buried inside an online community. At first glance, it looked like countless other personal stories that appear on the internet every day. There were no dramatic headlines, no official documents, no supporting evidence attached to the post. Yet hidden inside that lengthy message was a story powerful enough to trigger one of the most shocking celebrity controversies of the year. The writer claimed to be the former girlfriend of a famous actor identified only as Actor K. According to her account, the relationship had been built on promises, trust, and emotional dependence. She described a romance that initially appeared loving, but gradually transformed into something deeply painful. The most serious accusation centered on an alleged pregnancy. The woman claimed that when she became pregnant, the actor persuaded her to terminate the pregnancy. According to her version of events, he reassured her that marriage would eventually follow and that the decision was necessary for their future. She later alleged that after the abortion, the relationship deteriorated and eventually ended. The details were intensely personal, but what truly captured public attention was the emotional language. The writer did not simply describe events. She described feelings of betrayal, feelings of abandonment, feelings of manipulation. Most importantly, she portrayed herself as someone whose trust had been used against her. Within hours, readers began sharing the story across social media platforms. What happened next revealed something powerful about the modern internet. People were not waiting for proof. They were reacting to emotion. The post contained no recordings, no verified screenshots, no legal documents, no independent confirmation. Yet many readers felt convinced. The story sounded believable. And in the digital age, believability often moves faster than verification. As discussion spread, online users started investigating clues hidden inside the anonymous testimony. Every detail became evidence. Every timeline became a puzzle. Every hint became a lead. Internet communities compared filming schedules, public appearances, interview comments, and relationship rumors. The search for Actor K quickly turned into a collective online investigation. Before long, one name began appearing repeatedly: Kim Seon-ho. The moment his identity entered public discussion, the controversy exploded. The reaction was immediate because of who he was at that particular moment. This was not an actor struggling for recognition. This was not a celebrity already surrounded by controversy. This was a man enjoying the most successful period of his career. His reputation had become one of his greatest assets. Fans viewed him as trustworthy. Brands viewed him as safe. The entertainment industry viewed him as valuable. That image now faced direct collision with accusations that seemed completely incompatible with everything audiences believed about him. The contrast intensified public fascination. People were not simply evaluating allegations. They were comparing two versions of the same person. One version was a beloved public figure. The other was a man described in the anonymous post. Both versions could not easily coexist. As public attention intensified, speculation transformed into certainty. Many online users stopped asking whether Kim Seon-ho was involved. Instead, they began discussing his guilt as though it had already been established. The speed of that transformation was remarkable. No official statement had been released. No investigation had taken place. No evidence had been independently verified. Yet, public judgment was already forming. Meanwhile, additional posts began appearing across various online platforms. Some users claimed to possess insider information. Others claimed knowledge of the relationship. Several accounts appeared to support the original allegations. However, something unusual was happening at the same time. Many of these posts disappeared almost as quickly as they appeared. Messages were edited. Comments were removed. Threads vanished. The internet was producing information at an incredible speed, but it was also erasing information just as rapidly. This created an environment filled with uncertainty. People felt surrounded by details while simultaneously lacking clarity. The story was everywhere, yet nobody seemed capable of seeing the complete picture. As pressure mounted, attention shifted toward one critical question. How would Kim Seon-ho respond? Days passed. Speculation intensified. Media coverage expanded. Public pressure increased. Finally, a response arrived. On October 20th, 2021, Kim Seon-ho released a public apology. The statement immediately became the center of discussion, not because of what it said, but because of what it did not say. The apology acknowledged that he had hurt his former girlfriend through careless actions. He expressed regret. He apologized to fans. He apologized to colleagues. He apologized to people affected by the controversy. Yet he never directly addressed the central allegations. He neither confirmed nor denied them. That ambiguity created an entirely new wave of debate. For some observers, the apology functioned as an admission of guilt. Why apologize if the accusations were false? Others interpreted the statement differently. They viewed it as an attempt to calm an escalating crisis rather than provide a detailed defense. Inside the entertainment industry, public apologies often serve practical purposes. They can reduce tensions. They can prevent further escalation. They can buy time. But they do not necessarily answer every question. The result was a strange paradox. The apology provided a response, yet it also created additional uncertainty. Instead of ending the controversy, it expanded it. The public was now forced to interpret silence. And silence can be interpreted in many different ways. Almost immediately, the consequences became visible. Companies began distancing themselves. Advertising campaigns were suspended. Promotional materials disappeared. Business partners reassessed their relationships. Television appearances became uncertain. Industry support weakened. What had taken years to build appeared to be collapsing within days. The speed was shocking. Yet from a corporate perspective, the logic was simple. Public perception carries financial consequences. Whether allegations are proven or not, association with controversy creates risk. Many companies chose caution. Protect the brand first. Ask questions later. For Kim Seon-ho, the impact was devastating. His removal from projects sent a clear message. The industry was reacting not to confirmed facts, but to public pressure. And public pressure had become overwhelming. Behind the headlines, another story was developing, a story about information itself. As journalists searched for facts, they encountered a growing problem. The available information remained fragmented. Pieces of the narrative existed everywhere, but complete verification remained difficult. Some claims circulated widely despite lacking evidence. Some discussions vanished before they could be examined. Some details appeared repeatedly, without clear sources. The result was a controversy fueled by uncertainty. Ironically, the more people discussed a story, the harder it became to determine exactly what happened. Emotion filled the gaps where evidence was missing. Assumptions replaced confirmation. Speculation evolved into accepted truth. The controversy gradually transformed from a private relationship dispute into something much larger. It became a public narrative. And public narratives often develop their own momentum. They are shaped not only by facts but by timing. Not only by evidence, but by perception. Not only by reality, but by interpretation. By the end of that week, one reality had become impossible to ignore. Kim Seon-ho's carefully built image had been shattered. Whether the allegations were entirely accurate, partially accurate, or misunderstood no longer mattered to many observers. The damage had already occurred. The public image that once seemed untouchable now appeared vulnerable. The actor who had symbolized warmth and sincerity suddenly found himself at the center of one of the most controversial stories in Korean entertainment. Yet beneath the headlines, important questions remained unanswered. How much of the story was true? How much remained unknown? Why did information keep disappearing? Why did the public reach conclusions so quickly? And perhaps most importantly, who was shaping the narrative that millions of people were now accepting as reality? Those questions will become even more significant in the days ahead, because the story was far from over. In fact, the most surprising developments had not yet appeared. The scandal that seemed settled was about to become far more complicated. And when new information finally emerged, it would challenge assumptions on every side of the debate. The public believed they were watching the conclusion of a celebrity downfall. Instead, they were only witnessing the beginning of a much larger story. Just when it appeared that the story had reached its conclusion, something unexpected happened. The public had already delivered its verdict. Media outlets had reported extensively on the allegations. Brands had distanced themselves. Television projects had been affected. Online discussions seemed to have settled into a single dominant narrative. For many observers, the case appeared closed. Then new information emerged. And suddenly, certainty became uncertainty. During the final days of October 2021, reports began appearing that challenged some of the assumptions driving the controversy. These reports did not completely erase the allegations, nor did they provide a simple answer. Instead, they complicated everything. The most significant development came when private text conversations reportedly exchanged between Kim Seon-ho and his former girlfriend became public through media reporting. For the first time since the scandal began, the public was presented with material that appeared more concrete than anonymous testimony. The reaction was immediate. People who had confidently accepted the original narrative suddenly found themselves confronting a different picture. Yet this new picture was far from straightforward. Rather than revealing a clear villain and a clear victim, the messages suggested something much more difficult to categorize: a complicated relationship between two individuals navigating emotional decisions, uncertainty, and personal consequences. Many readers expected the messages to confirm the accusations directly. Instead, they found conversations that appeared more nuanced. Discussions about responsibility, conversations about fear, moments of concern, attempts at reassurance, expressions of affection, and discussions about the future. The tone surprised many observers. The relationship described in these exchanges seemed far more complex than the public had initially imagined. That did not automatically invalidate the emotional pain described in the original allegations. However, it raised important questions. If events unfolded exactly as originally portrayed, why did the messages appear to show ongoing communication and mutual engagement afterward? Why did some conversations seem relatively normal even after the most serious events had allegedly taken place? The answers were not obvious, and that uncertainty created a dramatic shift in public discussion. For the first time since the controversy began, people started questioning whether they had received a complete story. Yet another problem quickly emerged. The messages themselves were incomplete. The public was not viewing every conversation. Only selected portions had become available. This introduced an entirely new layer of doubt. Who chose which messages would be released? What conversations remained hidden? Could missing context change interpretation? The questions multiplied faster than the answers. Instead of replacing one version of events with another, the released messages created competing narratives. One narrative continued to emphasize emotional harm, broken promises, and personal suffering. The other focused on the apparent complexity of the relationship and challenged the idea that everything could be reduced to a simple story of manipulation. Neither side possessed a complete record. Neither side could definitively prove its interpretation. As a result, public opinion began splitting into factions. Some believed the actor had been unfairly judged. Others argued that emotional damage could exist even if private conversations appeared affectionate. Both perspectives gained support. Both perspectives found evidence. And both perspectives revealed how difficult it can be to understand private relationships through fragments released into public view. As debate intensified, attention gradually shifted toward another figure in the controversy: the anonymous accuser. For days, the focus had remained almost entirely on Kim Seon-ho. Now, curiosity turned toward the woman behind the allegations. Media investigations eventually identified her as Choi Young-ae, a former television weathercaster. Once her identity became public, internet users began examining every available detail about her past. What followed reflected a familiar pattern often seen during major public controversies. The spotlight changed direction. The same online communities that had previously defended her account now began scrutinizing her credibility. Past relationships were discussed. Personal history became public conversation. Timelines were analyzed. Old information resurfaced. Speculation spread rapidly. The shift was dramatic. Within a matter of days, the public conversation had moved from unconditional support towards skepticism and investigation. But once again, clarity remained elusive. Some information circulating online was verified. Other claims appeared exaggerated. Still others lacked reliable confirmation entirely. Distinguishing fact from rumor became increasingly difficult. The internet seemed trapped in a cycle. Information appeared. People reacted. Details disappeared. New claims emerged. Public opinion shifted. Then the process repeated itself. Observers noticed a recurring pattern. Posts discussing critical details would suddenly vanish. Comments would be deleted. Entire discussions would disappear. Whether this happened because of moderation, legal concerns, personal decisions, or unrelated reasons remained unclear. What mattered was the effect. The constant appearance and disappearance of information created confusion. People felt surrounded by evidence while simultaneously lacking certainty. It became increasingly difficult to determine which details could be trusted. Then another surprising development occurred. The woman who had published the original accusations released a statement. In that statement, she expressed regret regarding the scale of damage caused by the controversy. She acknowledged that aspects of the situation had become amplified beyond her intentions. Most significantly, she removed the original post. This moment attracted enormous attention. Many expected a complete retraction. Others expected a fierce defense of every claim. Instead, the statement occupied a gray area between those extremes. The allegations were not entirely withdrawn, yet they were no longer presented with the same certainty and intensity. That ambiguity created new questions. Had misunderstandings occurred? Had emotions influenced the original presentation of events? Had private conversations between the two individuals changed the situation? Or had external pressures encouraged a softer public position? No clear explanation emerged. And because no explanation emerged, speculation flourished. For supporters of Kim Seon-ho, the statement seemed to validate concerns that the original narrative had been incomplete. For critics, the statement did not erase the emotional experiences described in the first post. Once again, both sides found reasons to maintain their beliefs. The controversy refused to settle into a single version of reality. Meanwhile, journalists and industry observers became increasingly interested in another aspect of the case: timing. Specifically, the timing of the leaked messages. The release occurred precisely when public criticism of Kim Seon-ho had reached its highest point. The information arrived at a moment when his reputation appeared to be suffering maximum damage. That timing led many observers to wonder how the messages became public. Who possessed them? Who authorized their release? Who benefited from changing the narrative? No definitive answers emerged. Official explanations remained limited. The source of the leaked conversations was never fully clarified. This absence of transparency fueled additional theories. Some people believe the release represented a deliberate effort to provide context before permanent damage occurred. Others suspected strategic media management. Still others argued that the timing itself proved nothing. Without direct evidence, all interpretations remained speculative. Yet one fact remained undeniable. The release dramatically altered public conversation. Before the messages appeared, discussion focused almost entirely on accusations. Afterward, discussion centered on uncertainty. That transformation was significant because uncertainty changes the dynamics of public judgment. It becomes harder to sustain complete confidence when competing interpretations exist. Gradually, the emotional intensity surrounding the controversy began to decrease. Media coverage became more measured. Headlines became less dramatic. Reporting focused more on facts and less on outrage. The atmosphere shifted, not because every question had been answered, but because the story had become too complicated for simple conclusions. At the same time, something curious happened across social media. Many of the loudest voices disappeared. Accounts that had aggressively promoted one side or the other became less active. Discussion volumes decreased. The controversy remained important, but the chaotic energy surrounding it started fading. It was as though an invisible boundary had been reached. The story could continue, but not with the same intensity. This shift created a new phase in the controversy. The focus moved away from immediate accusations and toward broader questions. Questions about media responsibility, questions about online judgment, questions about public perception, and questions about how narratives are constructed. The case had evolved beyond a dispute between two individuals. It had become a case study in modern information culture. Within less than 2 weeks, the public had witnessed a complete cycle. An accusation emerged. Public outrage exploded. Professional consequences followed. New information appeared. Public opinion shifted. And uncertainty replaced certainty. Each stage introduced new details. Each stage altered perception. And each stage left behind unanswered questions. By November 2021, the headlines had begun to fade. The constant updates slowed. The daily speculation became less intense. Social media conversations gradually moved toward newer controversies. To many casual observers, it seemed as though the story had finally reached its end. But in reality, the most lasting consequences were only beginning to emerge. Unlike scandals that conclude with courtroom decisions, official investigations, or definitive public statements, the controversy surrounding Kim Seon-ho entered a strange period of silence. There was no dramatic final confrontation, no public trial, no detailed official report that explained exactly what happened. Instead, the story drifted away from public view without delivering the closure many people expected. That silence became one of the most fascinating aspects of the entire case, because silence can mean many things. It can indicate resolution. It can indicate exhaustion. It can indicate privacy. Or it can simply indicate that some questions will never be answered publicly. For Kim Seon-ho, the months that followed represented a period of uncertainty. His absence from the public spotlight became noticeable. For actors, visibility is more than popularity. It is survival. The entertainment industry moves quickly. Audiences constantly seek new faces. Producers constantly search for marketable stars. When a celebrity disappears, even temporarily, the industry rarely pauses and waits. Someone else usually fills the space. That reality created enormous pressure. Every week away from public activity raised new questions. Would his career recover? Would producers trust him again? Would audiences forgive him? Or had permanent damage already been done? At first, there were few answers. Reports suggested that discussions had occurred privately between Kim Seon-ho and his former partner. Some media outlets indicated that communication had taken place behind closed doors. However, no detailed explanation emerged. No comprehensive timeline was provided. No official account fully explained how both sides reached a point where public conflict seemed to fade. The lack of transparency created an unusual outcome. The controversy appeared resolved. Yet, nobody outside the situation truly understood what resolution meant. This uncertainty left the public divided. For some people, the absence of continued accusations suggested that the original story had been exaggerated. For others, the lack of public confrontation did not automatically erase concerns raised earlier. Without definitive evidence supporting either position, both perspectives continued to exist. And so did the division. Months later, when Kim Seon-ho slowly began returning to public attention, the reaction revealed just how fragmented public opinion had become. Many fans welcomed him back immediately. They focused on his acting abilities. They emphasized the absence of legal action. They argued that the situation involved a private relationship that had been transformed into public entertainment. To them, the actor deserved another opportunity. Others remained unconvinced. They pointed out that unanswered questions still existed. They argued that uncertainty should not automatically be interpreted as innocence. To them, the controversy remained unresolved. Neither side could fully persuade the other, and that inability to reach consensus became one of the defining characteristics of the case. In many celebrity scandals, a clear narrative eventually emerges. Sometimes evidence confirms accusations. Sometimes investigations clear individuals of wrongdoing. Sometimes legal proceedings establish facts. In this case, none of those things occurred. There was no final verdict, no universally accepted conclusion, only competing interpretations supported by different pieces of incomplete information. That reality forced many observers to confront an uncomfortable truth. Public opinion often develops faster than evidence, and once formed, it rarely changes completely. The speed of the original backlash demonstrated this clearly. Within days, Kim Seon-ho experienced consequences that affected nearly every aspect of his professional life. Projects changed direction. Partnerships disappeared. Public perception shifted dramatically. All of this happened before a comprehensive understanding of the situation existed. The case exposed something important about modern celebrity culture. Reputation can be destroyed rapidly. Recovery, however, moves much more slowly. Even when new information emerges, it rarely receives the same attention as the original accusations. The first narrative often leaves the strongest impression. Correction struggled to catch up. Context struggles to compete. Nuance struggles to survive. This imbalance became one of the central lessons many observers drew from the controversy. The situation also highlighted the immense influence of perception within the entertainment industry. When the allegations first appeared, companies reacted immediately. From a business perspective, their actions made sense. Brands invest enormous resources into building positive public associations. Controversy introduces risk. Risk threatens profits. As a result, many companies respond to public sentiment rather than verified facts. This is not unique to one actor or one scandal. It is a structural reality of the industry. But the Kim Seon-ho controversy demonstrated how quickly that process can unfold. The speed of a professional decline reflected the speed of public outrage. Yet his gradual return revealed another reality. Damage is not always permanent. If public interest changes, opportunities can return. If audiences remain supportive, careers can recover. This raised a difficult question. Were the original decisions driven primarily by truth, or were they driven by fear of public reaction? The answer matters because it affects how future controversies will be handled. If decisions are based largely on perception, then narratives become extremely powerful, sometimes more powerful than verified facts. That realization made many observers reconsider not only this case, but countless others. As time passed, another unusual aspect became increasingly noticeable. No major new evidence emerged. No extensive message archives appeared. No secret recordings surfaced. No additional explosive revelations changed the narrative. For a controversy that had once dominated headlines, the sudden absence of new information felt significant. Some interpreted this as evidence that everything important had already been revealed. Others wondered whether certain details remained private intentionally. Without confirmation, neither explanation could be proven, yet the silence itself became part of the mystery. The absence of information encouraged speculation, and speculation thrives where certainty is unavailable. Another important element that remained unresolved involved the original discussion surrounding emotional manipulation and gaslighting. During the early stages of the controversy, these concepts became central to public conversation. The accusations resonated because they described experiences many people recognized emotionally. However, as the story evolved, defining those concepts became increasingly complicated. Terms like manipulation and gaslighting carry significant weight, but they can also be difficult to evaluate without complete context. Human relationships are often messy. They involve misunderstandings, emotional conflicts, regrets, and changing perspectives. Determining where ordinary relationship problems end and harmful behavior begins is rarely simple. The public never received enough information to establish that distinction clearly. As a result, interpretations vary dramatically. Some people viewed the original accusations as describing a clear pattern of harmful conduct. Others viewed the situation as a deeply personal relationship conflict that became amplified through public exposure. The available evidence allowed room for both interpretations. That ambiguity remains one of the reasons the case continues to attract discussion years later. People are not debating a settled story. They are debating an unfinished one. Looking back, perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the controversy is how quickly certainty emerged and how slowly uncertainty replaced it. In less than a week, millions of people felt confident they understood exactly what had happened. In the months that followed, new information repeatedly challenged that confidence. Yet the original impressions never disappeared entirely. This pattern reflects something larger than any individual celebrity scandal. It reflects the way information spreads in the digital age. Accusations travel rapidly. Clarifications move slowly. Emotional stories attract attention. Complex realities often do not. The internet rewards certainty even when certainty is impossible. And once a narrative becomes widely accepted, correcting it becomes extraordinarily difficult. The Kim Seon-ho controversy became a powerful example of that phenomenon, not because it provided clear answers, but because it exposed how difficult finding answers can be. Years later, discussions about the case continue to return to the same unresolved questions. What exactly happened between the two individuals involved? How accurately did the original accusations reflect reality? Did the leaked messages provide meaningful context or only selective fragments? Why did the public receive incomplete information from multiple directions? And perhaps most importantly, how should society evaluate situations where certainty remains unavailable? These questions remain relevant because they extend beyond one celebrity. They apply to modern media itself. They apply to online culture. They apply to the relationship between evidence and belief. The controversy became more than a personal dispute. It became a reflection of how contemporary audiences construct truth. In many ways, that may be the most lasting legacy of the entire case. Not the accusations, not the apology, not the leaked messages, but the realization that public understanding is often built from fragments. Fragments of evidence, fragments of emotion, fragments of interpretation. Each fragment may contain part of the truth, yet none of them may reveal the whole picture. And when those fragments conflict, certainty becomes impossible. Perhaps that is why the story continues to resonate, because it resists simple conclusions, because every answer seems to generate another question, because every piece of evidence appears incomplete. The original allegations point in one direction, the private messages point in another. The later statements introduce additional complexity. The silence that followed leaves room for endless interpretation. Together, these elements create a narrative that feels perpetually unfinished. A puzzle with missing pieces. A story without a definitive ending. And maybe that is the most uncomfortable part of all. Human beings naturally seek closure. We want clear heroes, clear villains, clear explanations. This case offered none of those things. Instead, it revealed how messy reality can become when private relationships collide with public scrutiny. It showed how quickly reputations can change, how powerfully emotions influence perception, and how difficult it can be to separate fact from narrative once millions of people become invested in a particular version of events. In the end, the story of Kim Seon-ho is not remembered because it delivered certainty. It is remembered because it never did. The accusations, the apology, the leaked conversations, the shifting public opinion, and the eventual silence all exist together without fully aligning. No court ruling settled every question. No official report explained every contradiction. No final statement provided complete clarity. Only fragments remain. Fragments that shape careers. Fragments that influence public perception. Fragments that continue to inspire debate years later. And perhaps that is the lasting lesson hidden inside the controversy. Sometimes the most important question is not what happened. Sometimes the more important question is how we decide what happened. Because in a world shaped by viral information, incomplete evidence, and instant judgment, truth itself can become fragmented. And when that happens, certainty becomes the rarest thing of all. The headlines eventually disappear. The public moves on. New stories replace old ones. Long after the headlines disappeared, the case continued to leave traces, not because new evidence emerged, not because new accusations appeared, but because the controversy had become something larger than the individuals involved. It had become a story about reputation, perception, and the fragile nature of public trust. Years after the events of 2021, Many people could still recall exactly where they were when the allegations first exploded across the internet. The speed of the reaction had been extraordinary. A single anonymous post triggered a chain reaction that spread through media outlets, social platforms, entertainment companies, and fan communities. Within days, an image that had taken years to build appeared to collapse. Yet, when people look back on the controversy later, many realized something unusual. The story they remembered was often different from the story that actually unfolded. Some remembered only the accusations. Others remembered only the leaked messages. Some remembered the apology. Others remembered the comeback. Very few remembered every stage of the controversy in its full complexity. That selective memory revealed an important truth. Public scandals are rarely remembered as complete histories. They are remembered as impressions, fragments, moments, images, and those fragments often become more powerful than the facts themselves. For Kim Seon-ho, the experience represented more than a professional challenge. It represented a transformation of identity. Before the controversy, his public image had been built around certainty. Fans believed they knew exactly who he was. The industry believed it understood his value. Audiences believed they understood his character. After the controversy, certainty disappeared. Whether people supported him or criticized him, most acknowledged one reality. The image had changed forever. Not necessarily because every accusation had been proven. Not necessarily because every defense had been accepted. But because once doubt enters a public narrative, it rarely disappears completely. This phenomenon extends far beyond celebrity culture. It affects politicians, athletes, business leaders, public figures of every kind. Trust can take years to build. It can be damaged in days. And rebuilding it is often far more difficult than creating it in the first place. The Kim Seon-ho controversy became a powerful example of that reality. Yet, perhaps the most revealing aspect of the case was not the scandal itself. It was the public response. The controversy exposed how modern audiences consume information. Many people formed strong opinions before all available information emerged. Others refused to reconsider their positions even after new details appeared. Supporters and critics often viewed the same evidence while reaching completely different conclusions. This was not necessarily because one group was honest and the other dishonest. It was because human beings naturally interpret information through their existing beliefs. When people expect someone to be innocent, they notice evidence supporting innocence. When people expect someone to be guilty, they notice evidence supporting guilt. The controversy demonstrated how powerful those psychological tendencies can become when amplified by millions of online voices. At the same time, the case revealed the enormous influence of social media. In previous generations, stories moved through newspapers and television broadcasts. Information traveled relatively slowly. Editors served as gatekeepers. Verification often occurred before publication. The digital age operates differently. Information moves instantly. Reactions spread globally within minutes. Public judgment frequently arrives before investigation. The Kim Seon-ho controversy unfolded within this environment. Every development traveled at extraordinary speed. Every rumor gained visibility. Every interpretation found an audience, and every mistake became difficult to correct. Some observers argued that the controversy represented a warning about the dangers of immediate judgment. Others viewed it differently. They argued that public discussion creates accountability and gives people opportunities to share experiences that might otherwise remain hidden. Both perspectives contain elements of truth, and once again, the controversy resisted simple conclusions. Perhaps that is why it continues to be discussed years later. Not because people agree about what happened, but because people disagree. The case remains relevant precisely because it remains unresolved. There is no universally accepted ending, no final chapter that satisfies every question. Instead, the story exists in a space between certainty and doubt, a space where interpretation becomes unavoidable. For historians of media culture, the controversy may ultimately be remembered as an example of a larger shift taking place around the world. A shift in how truth is communicated. A shift in how reputations are shaped. A shift in how public opinion forms. The events surrounding Kim Seon-ho did not create those changes, but they revealed them. They expose systems that normally operate in the background. Systems driven by algorithms, attention, emotion, and speed. Systems capable of elevating someone to extraordinary popularity, and capable of placing that popularity at risk almost overnight. As time passed, another lesson became increasingly clear. Not every question receives an answer. Modern audiences often expect complete transparency, complete explanations, complete closure. Reality does not always provide those things. Some events remain partially hidden. Some conversations remain private. Some truths remain known only to the people who live them. The controversy demonstrated the limits of public knowledge. Millions of people followed the story. Countless articles were written. Endless discussions took place. Yet despite all of that attention, certainty remained out of reach. That realization can feel frustrating, but it may also be valuable because it encourages humility. It reminds us that observing a story from the outside is not the same as living it from the inside. And perhaps that is the final lesson hidden within this controversy. The most important question may never be whether one side won the argument, or whether one narrative ultimately proved stronger than another. The more important question may be what the controversy revealed about us, about how quickly we judge, about how confidently we interpret incomplete information, about how easily narratives can become accepted as truth, and about how difficult it can be to reverse those narratives once they take hold. Years from now, many people may forget specific details of the allegations. They may forget the dates, the headlines, the statements, the online debates. But the broader lesson will remain. A lesson about perception, a lesson about reputation, a lesson about the growing distance between information and certainty. Because in the end, the story was never only about celebrity. It was about the modern world itself. A world where information arrives instantly, where judgment spreads rapidly, where narratives compete for attention, and where the truth is sometimes hidden beneath layers of emotion, interpretation, and assumption. The controversy may never deliver a definitive conclusion, but perhaps that is precisely why it continues to matter. Not because it answered every question, but because it forced people to ask better ones. And sometimes, those questions endure far longer than the headlines ever could.